We need to do an intro. No, this is going to be the intro, isn't it? I was just like, we need to do an intro, and I
Well,
know immediately that this is going to be the intro
there is
because
no intro.
because there's
There
no
is.
intro.
Well, I mean,
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the party.
oh no, maybe we could just maybe busting
Maybe we
out an
need
intro for our
intro.
very first one.
So
You know.
hello everyone. We are doing a YouTube. Have you ever done a YouTube before? This is a YouTube video. Where we're recording ourselves, so you get to see our beautiful faces if you've never seen my beautiful face before, Hamish's beautiful face before, and we're joined
Yeah.
by our very special guest, Shingo. Do you want to introduce yourself to the Push the Point
Hello.
audience?
Hi, I'm Shin. I play Flesh and Blood in the UK, and I got pretty lucky at Road to Nuts, so that's why I'm here today.
He's the most understated
Hey,
understated man in all of Flesh and Blood.
mate, you got lucky 3 times.
Yeah, you don't get
How
lucky
did you
three
do it?
times.
Well, you do get lucky 3 times,
Well,
but we'll discuss this as we discuss the deck. Don't worry,
yeah.
I'll
Well,
explain why I think I got lucky.
so
Yeah.
look at all these cars that bring you so much luck.
Yeah,
I know.
it's just complete. Everyone knows Dory is a high roll luck based. No, no, it's cool.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
good.
yeah.
So Shin is the three-time winner of UK Road to Nationals. I believe you won in Glasgow. Which ones were they, Shin? It was Glasgow and two
So
others.
my first one was Bash, so Derby.
Oh yeah.
Second one was Trinity Card Capital
Yeah,
and
that's
Newcastle, and then went to Living Realms and had a measly top 8, and then Glasgow where I ended up winning again.
yeah, a
Yeah,
measly
and I
top
would like
eight. You should
I
be
would like
careful
to
who you're
shout.
talking to. Bubble Boy over here is gonna be
Oh
pissed.
no.
Wait, before
Anyway,
we get started though, I do want to shout out every single one of those tours. Everyone there was
Yeah.
amazing. It was
yeah.
great to meet the UK community, but even like the store owners, the staff there, everyone was really nice and really engaging. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, so
So
it
yeah.
was they were fantastic. I was at Trinity and I was also at Living Realms. They were great events. We're gonna get stuck in. So what we're gonna show you guys today is a deck tech video. You've seen them before. You don't always get them from three-time RTN winners, but
Ah,
Shin's very kindly reached out to us. He really wanted to share this deck with us, with you guys actually, not with us really. So we are, we've arranged this for him to talk through the deck, and if you're interested in running Dory, or you just want to know what you're coming up against Dory, because we were having a little chat beforehand. We're not sure how much you agree with this, Shin, but Dory is quite a hard deck. If you don't know what you're coming up against in a Dory player,
Mhm.
it can be very tricky, especially the blocking. Is that something you would agree with?
Completely agree. I think a lot of the reason why I say I got lucky is a lot of the new players joined at Monarch and haven't really played against Dory. And so it gives you this chance to a bit take advantage of that and kind of see a few weak blocks where you really punish those blocks.
Mm.
And there
mm.
is one card in specific we're going to discuss that punishes those blocks, those bad blocks even further.
Yeah, I might know what it is, but let's get stuck in. So we're gonna let Shin take the wheel on this one. So do you want to just get stuck in, Shin, and start telling us about your deck? Maybe start with
Okay.
the equipment.
Yep, sounds good. So, as Dan mentioned, I played Dory. She, in my opinion, is a great hero. Really like how she plays with attack reaction, and you can kind of bluff your way through the games. And so, my equipment was Dory's Trusted Dawnblade. I know there's been a few lists of Axis Dory going around, and I tried it, but I think the math of the Dawnblade makes a lot more sense. And I like the fact that you have counters on it that just keep snowballing, especially, and we'll discuss this again, in this no block or very little block meta. So after the Dawnblade, we had the Skull Cap,
Mhm.
three defense points, great card. You want armor, you have the OG Fridge. So Skull Cap, bracers, three again points of armor in total, and plus 1 point of attack, which is always very helpful to get over those pesky breakpoints of 3 and to
Mm.
be coming in for 4.
Mhm.
Then we have Courage of Bladehold, and I actually also am running the Tunic. So these are the two chess pieces. If I'm playing against a control deck that's going to be a bit slow and I need my shunts, I'll play the Tunic.
Mm.
Otherwise, I'll take the Courage. Realistically, 2 points of armor, but the great effect that lets your weapons attack be cost 1 less this turn, so you will swing the Dawnblade for free. And then we have the Refraction Bolters, which is one of the key cards really in this deck because it gives you go again on hit by breaking the Refraction Bolters. And then we have one
Oh, you do
And
have it. Yeah.
yeah,
Ah,
I
yeah,
do
good
run
lad.
Norrune 1,
Yeah.
and it was to respect the Sonata Viserai list that came out of the Devastation series, because I saw a lot of people go for OTK Viserai and so on. And so I started running Norrune 1. You don't actually run it for chain or anything else. It is literally just for the Viserai deck. And I
That's
did end
cool.
up playing it twice. So
So you did
yeah.
end up using it. So that's interesting because I was thinking
Mhm.
I don't run any Norrune in my chain list because I don't respect the OTK Viserai, but that is
You're a
interesting.
brave boy.
Yeah, I'm very brave. Well, my
Yeah, man.
my feeling is if they're OTKing me, I'm gonna have to take it
Mhm.
anyway, so it's not gonna help. But so with
Yeah,
the I just because I think the only real one there is the courage and the tunic, right? In terms of the decision point that someone might have to make if
Yeah.
they were running this deck. So you're saying that you're going to run the tunic when you want to get those steel blade shunts out for free. So the steel blade shunt is the defense reaction that pops them for a damage if they swing at you with a weapon.
Correct.
Is that so? You're seeing in those in the Bravo matchups? Are there any other control matchups where you might run that tunic?
So I like to run it in the Bravo matchup. As you said, that's just for paying for the Steel Blade Shunt. The Dory matchup, I actually play the Tunic, even though
Hmm.
if you decide to play the Courage, I would completely understand it because it's just more armor. But I think the Shunts are more important than armor in that matchup, so I prefer the Tunic.
Hmm.
And then I also play it in the Dash matchup. I
Yeah,
think those are the three where I can justify the Tunic over Courage. I believe that everything else, except if I have a hard read on a control Katsu, I will
yeah.
be choosing the Courage.
And so that courage is it really? When do you think you're going to be popping that card? Is it to gain advantage in the game? Is it to close out the game? Like when is the optimum time to be using that effect of the courage, which is the -1 cost on the weapon swing?
So there are two scenarios in which I think you use the courage. And one of them is your huge turn, right? You're going
Mm,
to swing with supremacy. You have some other boosts and stuff. You're trying to hit 2 to 3 times that turn. You pop the courage, makes your swings free, and hit those multiple times, right? So that's one scenario. Another scenario I like to keep it in is if my opponent got their pivot turn, right? I got them low and I'm chipping and they're getting lower and lower, but I need to start blocking, and I don't have any cards in my hand. At this stage, breaking the courage for just like a Hail Mary where you swing for free and they have to respect that is also, it has won me a lot of games.
mm,
So courage is versatile that you can use it in an aggressive manner, to hit multiple times, but you can also use it as a last ditch effort to just swing for free because you could block with your whole hand and still come with a weapon swing for at least three, and if you have
mm,
a few counters, it could be 4 and 5. And if you have the bolters up, like I've had turns where I break courage, swing for free, they can take the hit, break my bolters, swing again. And that's like 6 to or more damage with no cards in hand.
mm.
So courage and bolters are essential or really important.
Amazing. Right, should we get stuck into should we talk about the main deck? So I
yeah.
don't know how you want to do it, Shin. You want to start talking about the cards? Maybe mention if a
Uh,
card is a sideboard card, but just
Why
get
don't we
stuck
just
in.
why don't we start with the Reds, man? When we
Yeah, the
go,
reds
yeah,
are
let's go.
they're the
Let's go with
exciting
the
ones. The red
yeah,
ones are the
man.
exciting ones. So
okay, that sounds good to me. I'll start with actually four reds, which are these four.
yeah.
And these are the only attack actions that this deck runs. So you run three CNCs and one nourishing, right? And as people can guess, one nourishing, and I also like to put one CNC, are in the main board, and then two CNCs in the sideboard. And this is partially to respect Prism, right? Because you want some 6 attack to break phantasms. But I also found that CNC and or 6 card hands, if you use this and you have a card in Arsenal, are just really good in general situations.
Mm.
And Dan was laughing when I mentioned the CNC because he knows I've always loved
Shin
playing
loves the scenes.
CNC and Dory.
Oh,
I think the card is
it's
broken.
good.
It's a
Lexi is
broken
coming
card.
out Lexi is coming out with two Arsenal. It's only going to get better. CNC makes a lot of sense because it
Yeah,
allows you to
It's a
punish the other
it's
person
a
and forces a block.
I think CNC in Dory is a card that kills good players.
Hmm.
People that aren't expecting it are not expecting that attack action to come in, and they block out the first swing, and then you throw the CNC at them, and it's just brutal. And I remember
And-
maybe it was worse in the Ira days where you had a handful of defense reactions, but like
yeah,
I like it. I like the spice. I like it a lot.
we still see a lot of decks with defense reactions though, because in my opinion, the meta, or at least the UK meta, was divided into two camps. You had the people who couldn't block or chose not to block, so the chains, the Katsus with their two blocks, and so on. And then you had decks that really block, like the Bravas and the Dashes. And I
Mm,
think CNC actually works against both of those. Obviously, against Chain, you only run one CNC, it's too expensive to
mm,
run more. Uh, but against Dash and Bravo, where they have a lot of defense reaction, it forces them to block again. And a lot of these decks rely on having a card in Arsenal to set
yeah.
up for the next turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chain
So,
especially is going to be sticking those
mhm,
awkward Art of Wars, those shadow puppetries. They're the key cards that take Chain's turns from disgusting to incredibly disgusting. So being able
yep,
to throw that CNC down really deprives them. I mean, if they've got an Art of War in there, they're probably going to block it out. You might even get the husk off them.
mhm,
And getting the
It's
husk
just
off,
CNC. It's just
yeah,
CNC in general. It's just
yeah,
such a punishing card if you can like there's a lot of people it's another thing that Dorinthea can provide
yeah,
to stop a bad block. You know, it's a good
yeah.
pivot turn. Do
If
you know
you're
what I mean?
getting a husk off
mhm.
a chain player and it's not resetting the counters on the Dawnblade, I feel like you're very happy. Um,
and and also it punishes OTK Viscerai because going in,
Oh
your
yeah, no,
I
obsession
was
with that.
we know that.
I
We know
know it
that.
sounds, it almost sounds like a meme now, right? But going into my first road to Nat, OTK Viscerai was concerning. Devastation had just came out,
It
Sonata
is,
Viscerai was
yeah.
a thing.
It
Yeah,
is.
there there
It
was
can be a thing
there was an OTK chain that going around in the RTN, early
in the
RTNs,
UK.
and it was doing good. It was getting wins. It was knocking good
Yep.
players out that just were like, what is this chain deck doing? I've got
Yeah,
this in the
element of
bag, and
surprise.
suddenly you die. So yeah.
But the other reason I like these four cards, sorry, is that you can play them by themselves, right? So a lot of the time, if you're in the back foot, you end up blocking, and you can just do a two-card turn with CNC and still force a block from the opponent. While if you're using all your other cards, a two-card hand from Dory is actually not very scary most of the time,
Hmm.
but CNC does force that block. Furthermore, as we'll see, this deck has a lot of innate go again, and that just allows you to play the CNC after they overcommit to blocking your first swing.
Yeah.
Which again, this is why I love Dory. Is it's a game of poker, right? You're bluffing what you have, and if they overcommit to a block, you punish with a CNC. If
Hmm.
they undercommit to a block, you punish with your attack reactions. You always have both, right?
Yeah.
Or at least you always have to pretend like you have both.
Yeah.
Right, let's get away from these awful attack actions and Dory, and let's talk about the non-attack
so
actions, i.e., pretty much every other card in the deck.
So I'm gonna leave these three cards aside for five
Oh,
seconds
they're the
and just
spiciest
Oh no!
ones.
yes, exactly. That's why we'll
Oh
leave them
Jesus!
aside for now. We'll leave them aside for now. Everything else
Oh
in this deck is really an extension of the Blitz deck, right? So Aaron Curtis took a very similar list to everything else you see here to the charity event of Card Merchant, and he did really well going all the way to the finals,
yeah,
right?
he came runner up.
And as loyal listeners of Push the Point will know, Hamish had a chat with him, and we discovered that he actually took the Blitz list and kind of expanded on it further. And that's
Yeah.
just what Dory does really well, is going tall with a hint of wide. And so a lot of these cards do that. And if we focus on the red cards, you have the Steel Blade Supremacies, right? Those are your important turns. Great
Hmm.
card, gives you +2 and draw if you hit, right? Then you have Red Overpower and Red Route, attack reactions that are expensive, but that can close a game or really get you over a big block if people overcommit.
Hmm.
And then you have Spoils of War, +2,
Uh,
and an innate go again. And this is where like cards like Command and Conquer comes in, is if people decide to overblock your Spoils of War turn to deny you the second weapon swing,
mhm.
you have other options to you. Sharpened Steel and Iron Song Response are great. They cost 0 and they give your weapon +3. Iron Song Response is a bit trickier these days because it's a reprise and you play against a lot of decks that don't block.
Yeah, I can
So
imagine that would be tricky.
there have been conversations about whether you should maybe cut them to 2. I
Hmm.
disagree. I think eventually your opponent will need to block, so having 3 is really important for consistency. And then we have, in my opinion, the MVP, which is Warrior's Valor. I
Yeah,
run
Oh
all
yeah.
9 versions
Of
of Warrior's
course.
Valor.
so good.
It's
It's a
it's too
common.
good.
It's the card you don't
Uh,
want to see.
yeah,
No.
exactly. It's a common, and the deck does not run without it because Dory is not the most aggressive deck out there, right? Dory, on average, can output, I would say, 6 to 18 damage. But without Warrior's Valor, she is way closer to that 6 damage a turn than
Hmm.
to an 18. And so decks can
Mm.
just ignore Dory's swings if she's not going to get go again. And Warrior's Valor is that card that says you can't ignore it. You either block it or I'm coming in for maybe 12 this turn.
You will get that reprise trigger
Yeah.
because you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
Um,
it's it's sometimes with Dory, you see them pop their bolters and you think, okay, now
mhm.
I'm relatively safe. If I'm taking cards out of their hand now, they're not going to be able to get their go again. And
Uh,
the Warrior's Valor is just so tricky when it comes up late game and you're just like,
mhm.
I do not want to deal with this card right now.
Absolutely. I think if you see someone pop their bolters, you should first take a good old look into their in their bin and just go right. And
Mhm.
how many Warriors Valors are there? If you're seeing like a really minimal amount, it is like Trip said, it's like, oh boy,
And
we
that's a
ain't
very
over
good
yet.
point. So I will pop my bolters sometimes earlier than I would like to create pressure, but I'll only do so if I think, oh, look, I still have 9 Warriors Valor in my deck.
Yeah.
I will
Yeah,
get go again from somewhere else. I can do this now.
yeah.
The other card is Hit and Run Red, which is an innate go again. And if you had go again or if you're swinging for a second time, it's actually +3. Your next attack gets +3. And the beauty of Hit and Run is it's your next attack gets +3, not your next weapon attack. So you can do a Nourishing Emptiness for 9 dominated. Um,
I thought it was attack.
Yeah.
Well, it must say
So
attack
dope.
because it doesn't say weapon attack, right?
Mm.
exactly. It's if you've swung with a weapon attack, your next weapon attack has go again, and your next attack gets +3.
It's even worse than I
So
thought. It's terrible.
Oh god, yeah.
No wonder you've been winning all these events.
Yeah. Been punishing. I didn't even know that. See,
Out of, out of
this is
out
why we
of
get punished.
out of interest, Jim, before we move on from hit and run, so you only run the red ones. Is that because you're really utilizing that for the
so
+3? Because
Oh,
obviously the blues. Have you got the blues in
oh
as well?
yeah, I
Yeah.
was
I
gonna
also
say
run
Steve
the
Blues.
blues.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also run the blues. The reds are for the +3, but it's also to have that innate go again
Yeah. A late game,
because
really nice.
of the spice we're gonna discuss.
Yeah.
But before I forget, you do have also Out for Blood and oh my, Stroke of Foresight, which
Oh yeah.
are gives you +3 for 1, and then you have the defense reactions because you have to respect that there are more aggressive decks out there and on hit effects. So you run the red shunts and the sync belows.
Yeah.
Now, why do you want to go again? Is because of this underrated card, which was shown to me by our dear and great Dante Delfico. Right?
Ah, the
He,
great and mighty Dante.
yeah, I know. I
Our
was
Lord and
panicking about
Savior
what.
Dante Delfico.
Oh yeah. Devils may
Oh,
cry.
yeah.
Well, to be fair to Dante, this card was overlooked, and I was panicking about what to play to Rochinats. And I actually sent him a message saying, "Can you send me a Katsu list?" And he's like, "No, try this Dory list." And his Dory list was actually kind of terrible, but it was too
Brutal.
aggressive. It was too aggressive, right, for my
Right.
playstyle. But he made it very clear that he thought Duskpath Pilgrimage was a card that everyone was sleeping on.
Hmm.
And after playing with it, I 100% agree with him. And what Duskpath Pilgrimage does, let me read it first of all, is your next weapon attack this turn gains +3. And if this hit, you may attack an additional time with this weapon this turn. Right?
It's a
And
Dory
it costs
trigger.
1 to play.
Yeah.
It is the Dory trigger, but the sneakiest part about it is it stacks with Dory. So if you hit after playing Dustpath Pilgrimage, you can swing your weapon attack to your weapon 2 more times as long as you have go again, even if the second swing doesn't hit.
Hmm.
Right? And this allows you to
Okay.
have these huge three swing turns that people have to respect, right? And so one thing it's amazing to see is something like Supremacy, Dustpath, and Bolters are still up. Because
Right.
you're gonna draw from Steelblade Supremacy. You're coming in at a default 9, right? If you have like anything else in Arsenal, it's just a huge turn that's
Look,
very
you can
difficult to
just
block.
see my face, man. I'm just sitting there like I know this is like a deck tech video, and I'm just like,
Yeah,
This
oh
is
man,
my favorite moments from RTN is I don't know, I think this might have happened twice, but it's like people calling the judge over when it's like, as I'm sure you're gonna talk about this in a
mhm,
second, because if you hit twice with Dawnblade, you get the counter before the end of the turn, so on the third
that is
swing
correct.
you can swing the counter, so people calling the judge to be like, is this how it
And
works? This can't be how it works. This has got to be at the turn. It's like it says it on the card.
it
Because
is
it's
how
just
it
too
works.
good.
And it makes the blocking mouth also very difficult because people, RTNs are long events. So by the
Mhm.
end of it, you're pretty tired. And you might forget that there's a sneaky +1 that's going to make its way.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
it actually matters a lot because
yeah,
all Dory wants to do is to hit by 1 extra damage if you're blocking, right?
Mm.
If I get that 1 extra damage through and you blocked with your hand, I'm really happy. I get to keep my counter, get a new counter, and I just keep doing what I'm doing. So yeah, Dustpath Pilgrimage, crazy card in our meta.
Yeah.
yeah.
Again, it only goes in if you're expecting your opponent not to block. So against Katsus, against Chains, and against Prism, but it goes in against Prism not because you're expecting Prism not to block, but because against Prism, the whole game is a Hail Mary, right?
Yeah.
You're just
Yeah.
like praying to beat them before they kill you.
And
Um,
then sometimes they have instances in their hands. It just
mhm,
make and they want to keep
exactly.
so they want to create the pressure back themselves. So
Yeah.
And those are the red cards. Any
Yeah.
Wow.
questions or comments
So
for the red
yeah,
cards
I think
before we move on?
you got a couple that aren't really power cards. You've got you do have the Steelblade Shunt Reds and the Sink Below
Hmm.
Reds. I assume you're running those. So talk us about the matchups. So I think those are your you've got those 5 defense reacts and you've got the 2 blue Steelblade Shunts as well. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? You
Yeah.
kind of touched on it when you were talking about the Tunic earlier, but just to remind people about those cards.
So the red shunts are really interesting because in Blitz, we all discovered that shunt was a way to close a game, right?
Yeah.
You get
Mm.
to 1 life point, and shunt does the 1 damage on a weapon attack that can actually win you the game.
Hmm.
But more importantly, I knew that I was going to be facing other Dory players. And Dory versus Dory is a very interesting matchup, right? Where you do need a defense reaction, and having even just those 2 shunts make a huge difference where you can like block their huge turns,
Mm.
especially if you get one in Arsenal, right? The other matchup where it's very useful is Bravo, because Bravo comes in with his hammer for 6, your blue shunts block for 6, deal him 1 damage. I don't think I played in any other matchup other than Bravo and Dory, but they are so disruptive against another Dory player that it just
Yeah.
makes sense to
Yeah.
have them. The
And
blue
you
shunts,
wouldn't run them in against Bolton either.
no, too expensive for Bolton
Yeah.
swings.
Yeah, it's
They
probably fair.
overblock Bolton. I think it's too much for him.
Oh,
I
you
do
probably
run
don't.
the
Yeah, you
blue
don't need
shunts.
to because you don't have any attack action counts
Still
really.
I always leave the blue shunts in. They never make it into the sideboard. They're always into my main deck.
Just good
And
pitch.
the reason is, yeah, exactly. They pitch, and
Mm.
they're a defense reaction that sometimes, you have a weird uh Bravo dominate attack that comes in. You can still use that 4 block with your armor to deny their crush effect. Like it's a versatile card in blue.
Sure.
And then Sync Below is just great. It
Yeah,
allows you to
similar.
filter your hand.
It's a
It
nice card.
blocks for 4. Yeah, what is there not to like with Sync Below?
Do you run the
Awesome.
sinks? Do you run the sinks in the Dory matchup
You do.
in the mirror?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the mirror matchup is when you bring in all 5. The Bravo matchup is when you bring in all 5. And the Syncs, you will run them in some other matchups. Like I like them against Katsu because a
Mm.
lot of Katsu's breakpoints are 4 typically. So having them there for the red whelming gust wave makes sense.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Gotta love a 4 block defense react from Arsenal
Hmm.
against
Yep.
against the Dory, so that's pretty sweet. Yeah, nice one, Shin. So should we move on to the we'll talk about the yellows. We'll just do it in color order. I think that's
Yeah,
the easiest way to do it. And some
Yeah,
of
man.
sounds good.
the yellows, I mean, there's not many of them, but outside of the Warriors Valor, there's some of the most interesting cards, in my opinion, in the Dory deck. So do you want to talk a little bit about
Yes.
those ones?
So the yellows, like you said, first of all, three Warriors Valor. We already explained why Warriors Valor is
Yeah,
great. Nothing else to say. These give you +2, which is still huge because again, breakpoint of 5 at that stage,
Mm.
and they're really good. People have to respect them.
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
and then you enter. Let's start
Spice
with these two.
City.
Vice City, yeah.
Oh, here we go. This
So
is where
Why
yellows
this
tend to be
this
the
is
power,
the
don't they?
why
They tend
the
to.
you've got the card there why you don't block against both cards, which is
Uh,
why you never want to put any cards from hand against Dory.
yes.
this, this is
So
naughty. These ones.
Singing Steel Blade is a great attack reaction, right? But it needs reprise. So Singing Steel Blade really punishes you if you block from hand, because then I can go through my deck, get another attack reaction, and play it on that chain link. So
It's awful.
these three
It's
cards right
so not
here
nice.
are like, if you have any two of those in your hand. So sorry, if you
Yeah.
have Singing Steel Blade and any of these two in your hand, and the opponent overblock, you can really punish them by going to get the other one, right? Because
Hmm.
Yeah.
Twinning Blade lets you swing again this turn, even if you don't hit, and Glint gives you go again and allows
Yeah,
you to draw if they've blocked from hand,
yeah,
right? So Singing Steel Blade is great because it lets you be a versatile deck at any time. So
yeah.
when I built this deck, I realized I was taking a bit of a toolbox deck approach, right? Which is back from when I used to play Yu-Gi-Oh! I always liked this toolbox deck approach, which is have an answer for everything kind of spread around your deck, and then nothing can beat you.
Mhm.
Completely flawed logic, but I have a lot of fun playing like that, right?
But
So I
you would
think,
have thought that tutoring is very strong,
Yeah.
yeah,
and
it
being
is.
able to just find any card that fits the
Yeah.
bill.
And you can go find a route, you can find an overpower, you can find glint, you can find twinning, and most importantly, you can find itself. So the final in Glasgow, it was a really close game, and I went into the tank for like 5 straight minutes because it was against Shane. It's the
Right.
final turn. I can get him to 1 mathematically, and then he still has 2 cards in hand and is going to banish 5, and I'm going to die if I can't block everything, and I'm not running any arcane barrier, so I'm most likely going to die.
Yeah.
Until I realize I can play a singing, go get another singing, and then go get my Red Iron Song response with the
There's your
second
plus
singing.
one.
Yeah.
And there's the
Yeah.
+1 I needed. And again, it's just how versatile this card is.
Oh,
Now, it has
yeah.
one drawback, it's reprise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Never
people
block.
who know how, yeah, pretty much.
Welcome to the no block
Um,
meta.
Yeah.
Welcome to the no block meta. In this case, you still want to see it, but just further down the game, because
Yeah.
eventually people do need to block after a
Yeah.
while. But in TCC, my final game, I had singing for the last 3 turns in Arsenal. And
Uh,
Jamie, who was on chain, had a lot of experience playing Dory, so he just refused to block, and it was the most frustrating thing ever. Uh, and it almost won him the game. Only reason I won is I got lucky. He didn't banish any seeds. So there you go.
right.
Yeah, and I think also I think with Singing Steelblade, it's one of those cards that you really, if you're playing against Dory, you'll soon realize that that's probably the card that they have in their arsenal after a while. When you're
Hmm.
like, this is interesting, they're not playing it out. It's either that or an Iron
Yeah.
Song response red. That's generally my
And
my view, and you can normally tell when it doesn't come out which one it is.
mhm. And
Mm.
I'm
But
always
there's
happy
you
to
will reach a
Arsenal.
point where you'll just be like, well, I haven't got enough life left now, and I
Hmm.
know I'm gonna lose because I know that card's in there, and there's nothing I can do about it. I have to block, otherwise I die, and then it just destroys you.
Yeah.
And it does give you +1. I've played naked singing steel blades just for the extra 1 damage to get my opponent in their red range, where then the
Yeah.
next turn they have to do something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was always a really impactful card, and the +1 is part of that because we haven't really mentioned this, but if you played against Dory a lot of times, you know, you're always doing your 3 times tables in your head. You're thinking, right, like what 3 and 3 and 3, and then like, well, they hit me with 5, so I need to block for 8 or I need to block for 11. It's just this classic thing that you get stuck into. And we
Yep.
talked about it before,
The three
cards
times
that
tables.
break it. It's this one because you +1 fetch 9 song response, that's +4. It's the overpower because fuck overpower, like it's just because,
Oh yeah,
and
I
it's
know.
the route because obviously now you've lost a
Yep.
card, but it's like anything that breaks that convention of +3 is gonna mess with you, even if you know what you're doing, even if you played a
Yep.
ton of Dory games, because you can't put them on 4 every single time because you're just wasting resources most of the time, and that +1 is so good.
It's a breaking scales, isn't it? Like it could even
Yeah,
it's a cheeky
it could be
breaking
like that,
scales.
yeah.
In a pinch, at the worst, it's a breaking scales for one.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we all know breaking scales just ruins everyone. So
Yeah, like as Dan said,
We won't
you
talk
know,
about breaking scales.
no. But anyway, yeah. Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead, Shin.
now let's move on to the next yellow, which is Twinning Blade. We mentioned it in
I hate
passing.
this card. I generally
costs-
it cost me the game against you. But anyway, carry on.
The first thing to know is it costs 0 to play. It's a free card, right?
Yeah.
And it pretty much reads, if your opponent threw their hand, play me and win the game. Right?
Yeah.
It
And it
allows
blocks
you
for
to swing.
3. Busted.
Exactly.
It's why.
Yeah, so a lot of the time, if you have Twinning Blade and Spoils for War or Hit and Run, and you have that innate go again, and then your opponent blocks as accurately as they can, and you play the Twinning Blade, you can just swing again. If you have Twinning Blade and Glint, that's even better, because if they block from hand, not only do you get to draw a card from Glint and get to go again, then you get to play Twinning and swing again. And like I said, this deck relies on having 3 swings a turn, right? And Twinning just gives you that even further, right? Because you could play Twinning. So I have played Twinning in cases where they didn't block, just so that I could swing a 3rd time that turn. And that works too.
Yeah.
So again, Twinning is one of those cards where I actually have 2 in the sideboard. And depending on do I expect blocks or not, I will add 2 or leave them in the sideboard. Because this is the part that gets tricky. If you're playing against Chain and you don't expect Chain to block, Twinning is not nearly as useful. You still keep 1 in case you can tutor it. But yeah, you remove the other 2. If you're playing as Bravo and Dash, Twinning is a win count at that stage where you want them to block, and then you can play the Twinning. And speaking of win con against those big defensive decks, we will talk about one of the controversial cards in my deck. A lot of people I've talked to are telling me to cut it.
I like it, man.
I still think it's a great card,
Yeah.
which is Iron Song Determination. Right? Gives your next weapon attack +1 and dominate until end of turn. And again, it's free to play. And
Does it
it's a
cost
yellow.
nothing?
So yeah, it costs nothing.
Zero cost,
It's a yellow.
You clearly haven't played much Blitz, mate. You know exactly what that card does.
I've played against this. I haven't seen, like you said, Shin. I haven't seen this card in a while, and in my head I kept thinking it was probably a 1. And I suppose when you see it get played, you're like, oh, 0, oh, dominate, oh, +1. All right, whatever, man.
I was talking about breaking the courage to swing for free. Let's say you have this in Arsenal, lock with your forehand, break courage, swing for 4 dominated. If you still have bolters, 4 dominated is a very difficult thing to block most of the time if the opponent doesn't have any armor. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's taken exactly. The armor, isn't it?
And so what I like to do is just pitch it early, because it's a yellow, so actually pitches for 2 as well. So pitch it early, see it in the late game, close the game with it. And it's good against anything that blocks heavy, like Bravo and Dash. But I still also run 1 against some other more aggressive decks as a finisher, because when you're on a timer against Chain towards the end, and they will start blocking heavily because they're banishing 5 cards, so they don't care as much. So having the dominate is still very useful in those matchups as well.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think, well, the worst thing from my point of view, and one of the better things from your point of view, is that yellow pitch. The fact that if this was a red pitch, you'd be so disappointed drawing this early. But just pitch it. You're paying for 2 weapon swings with 1 card. It's not that bad.
Exactly.
No.
Sorry, my wife's just sneezing in the background, so I might say that.
Bless you.
So Yeah, and I was just saying the best thing I think, being able to pitch it for two is you're paying for two weapon swings, and that's really
Hmm.
great. And you're saving it for later, and having it late game is when it's probably at its strongest.
Yep.
Early game people don't care about dominate so much because they're probably not blocking
And
anyway, so who cares if it's dominated? But if you pitch it,
so
you get value from the pitch and then value later, which is really good.
Yeah.
it does actually have another use case scenario in early game, which is when you have it with supremacy.
Hmm.
Because a lot of the time,
Oh
people will
yeah.
be like, "Oh, don't block Dory, except if she has supremacy, then throw your hand," right? Because people want to deny you your supremacy turn. Well, if you
Well,
come
it's
with
dominated.
dominate, they can deny you your supremacy turn.
People are
So
playing wrong.
yeah.
Don't block supremacy either. Never block. That's,
No,
that's
that,
So
what,
well,
don't
it
get
can't
tricked.
be part of the
That's
no
it's
block
always a
meta.
trick. Why?
Does you not know?
well, then I'll happily take a supremacy turn where you
Yeah,
don't
you can
block
take
if
Oh,
it.
anything is
yeah,
blasted.
I bet you would.
Uh, but
Jeez.
those are the yellow cards.
Yeah, they're
Pretty
spicy,
good
man.
cards. They're
They're
really
good. They're
like
spicy.
versatile.
I think that's an
And
interesting thing about yellows in Fab. Like we've seen yellows
mhm,
get more utility through Prism, but there needs to be something about a yellow card, like because you're not getting the full pitch value, you're not getting the full power value. So it's that
Yeah,
utility from the yellows, and I think Dory has access to some really spicy yellows, which I think is really cool.
she
yeah,
So
man.
should
definitely
we
does.
should we move on to the blue cards? I mean, normally there's not a huge amount to say, so maybe Shin, you could talk a bit about um, not so much about what the blue cards do, apart from one
Mhm.
very obvious one that I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But talk about the value of blues in the deck and the number of blues
Okay.
that you've chosen to go with.
So the total number of blues is 22, right? But I always have two in the sideboard. And the two would either be the time snap potions or two of the blue out for bloods,
Mhm.
right?
Mm.
And the reason is time snap potion doesn't block. It's okay against setup decks where you have a bit of time. So I like to run them into those slower decks. Again, the time snap potions were Dante's idea. I actually don't stand by them that much. I could take them out of the deck, but he pointed out very clearly that he was right about Dusk's Pass, so he had to be right
He
about
has
the
to be
time
right about it.
snap.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
Um,
doesn't that support your three swing combo turn just a bit more?
a little bit more,
that's
yeah.
the idea, is that it supports your three swing combo turn. It gives you a bit more if you don't have to go again. If people
Mm.
are fully blocking, it's an innate go again where then you can go into CNC and stuff like that.
And as
It's
well, Prism check as
Yeah, I
well.
was gonna
exactly.
check up. I
Yeah.
was gonna chat about Prism because I mean, obviously people know about action points being good against
Hmm.
Prism, but I feel like against Prism, like you already said, it's a bit of a Hail Mary. You need to be.
Yeah.
Is there time to set up a time snap potion, or is it just there as a maybe a little bit of a bonus, but really you need to be pushing damage rather than trying to set up against Prism?
So against Prism in the couple of matches I had against Prism, I only played it I think once where the Prism was shifting between aggro and aura Prism,
Yeah,
and he was in one of his aura phases, so I had time to play it. But if they're on a full Herald phase, you don't really have time to
no,
play it in that case, and you're trying to swing as hard as you can. But sometimes the deck will break. You'll have a full hand of blues, you can't really do a lot, and you have an innate go again, they fully block it, and then you play your time snap, and that's great,
Yeah.
right? At first, if they make you go first, use time snap. That works too. Like
Yeah.
it is a versatile
yeah,
card.
good first turn card.
Um,
Mm.
and since we're on the measure of blues, so 20 blues, as we said, and your deck doesn't cost much, right? A lot of your cards are 0, 1, and then you have overpower for 3 and a route for 2, right? And the CNCs and nourishing for 2. Everything else costs 0 or 1, but you want to play a lot of those ones, and more so than what you have in hand, what you have floating is how you bluff your way with Dory,
Mm.
right? I
Yeah.
always like to have, like, there will be times where I have to think, do I use my bracers or do I represent a +3 because I need my opponent to block?
Yeah,
Right? And so I might decide to not use my bracers and lose 1 damage and represent that extra damage with a pump in hand. And then if they block, you arsenal your card and you're really smug about it because you got the upper hand in that exchange. If they don't block, you hit yourself for missing 1 extra damage.
Right.
it's
So
the
yeah,
cla
Dan
it's
is
the
right.
yeah.
Don't block against Dory.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't
It's
block.
the classic thing when you're playing against a Dory, you've always got them Iron Song response and Out for Blood, you're always thinking about the worst possible thing that they're going to do to you. When
Yeah,
really
you can't
half the
help it.
time it's probably like a blue overpower or something. That you're just like, yeah, there's nothing they can do. But you have to
And
respect it because, especially in the
mhm,
late game, when they can kill you, and then you're like, that's what I love about the Dory late game is that even with really weak two-card hands, sometimes you still get two
mhm,
cards out of your opponent because they don't.
yep,
No one wants to die to an attack reaction. It's the
No.
yep.
saddest thing in the game. Like, so people will block it even when it's like, what are the chances that he's got the perfect thing to kill me? But you always do it.
Uh,
You don't want to.
yeah.
No one wants to die to a razor. No one wants to die to a steel blade shunt. No one wants to die
Mhm.
to a
You know what the worst bit is that
like,
they always do got it.
yeah, they do against me.
Well,
Yeah,
They always got it. That's what annoys me.
statistically, you should have it, right? You
yeah,
have a lot
yeah.
of,
It's possible. Got to
and
play
if
to
you
win.
see a Dory come in and they have two floating, that idea of do they have route,
Yeah,
that just plays into it. And yeah, it comes down to how far in the game are you to respect that block.
yeah,
But the other thing with the blue cards is you were talking about how Dory has a lot of utility out of her yellow cards. She also has a lot of utility out of her blue cards. One
mhm.
of her best cards is Glyn the
Yeah, I
Quicksilver, and
thought you
that's
were
a
going to
blue,
say
right?
that.
Gives you go again, reprised raw card, cost 0 to play. You can get it with a Singing Steel Blade.
It's
It's
nutty.
like, yeah, you need that card in your deck. But everything else, when you get to the end game, has to be respected, right?
Yeah,
Iron Song Response Blue is still a +1. If you don't block perfectly, the +1 might be all I need. Warrior's Valor Blue, it still causes you to block because it's
Or
that
his fella.
if it hits, yeah, if
yeah.
that
It's
hits, I
great.
get go again. Hit and Run Blue, innate go again. And then we have Overpower Blue. Now that one,
Hmm.
I'm not 100% sold about it, but the reprise is that it gives you +4, and so once more that extra
Yeah.
1 that messes with your ×3 tables comes in
Oh.
really handy.
It's
And
true.
then we have
It's a
Shunt.
killer. It's a killer. And Shunt, yeah.
Man. Oh.
There's the
Well,
one damage, you got to be
Mhm.
you're thinking I can't go down to one. I can't really go down to two.
Yep.
Um, there's some decks that don't worry about it, like in Chain, you can, by the end game you don't have to be swinging. You love swinging with Nebula Blade, but
Mhm.
you can always stop. But like people like Katsu, oh, basically if you get Katsu down to one, no way is he throwing that Kadachu at you unless he's 100%
Yep.
sure, which is really, really nice to turn that up.
Or if he doesn't have a choice. Because
Yeah.
sometimes you put them in that spot where they're like, I have to swing with my weapon,
Mm.
or next turn he's gonna have 5 cards and he's gonna kill me anyways.
Yeah, if you're on a one
yeah.
one life versus one life Dori Katsu,
Hmm.
which can happen. I've seen
Yep.
Katsu match Katsu mirrors to go down to one health, and then you're in Kadachi lock time. They're thinking, well, I know I can get two cards out of their hand,
But what if it's a
but
shunt?
what
What if
if
it's
it's
a
a
shunt?
shunt and then I lose?
You could do
Um,
it, me. You could do it, me.
yeah.
Swing and
Hmm.
try and bait someone out with a Raiden for 0.
Oh,
I've
I
got picking a
used to.
picture in my hand, and then I just got shunted, and I was like, "Ah, that was my plan."
You'll be pleased to know the guy you did that was talking about that today at the time.
Oh, don't. Anyway, so yeah, no, it's
Yeah, so
shunt's nuts. Who
it's a
would have
great
thought?
Yep.
deck, and I think well, you've proved that it's a successful deck. And what I wanted to finish
Yeah.
up on, I mean, well, obviously, if you want to see, are we happy to share the deck list Shannon, in the video?
Yeah. No,
Yep.
obviously the deck list is on FabTCG.
Yeah.
There was a few
Oh yeah, of
mistakes
course.
out there, but we will attach a deck list on
Yeah, we'll
FabDB as
put a
well.
deck list, but I
Uh,
I, I wanted to finish with so before the start of the season, I think it's fair to
Mm.
say a lot of people counting Dory out or saying that Dory can't beat
yep.
Prism or saying that the deck is not as good as other decks. It's not going to be as successful as it has been in the past. It was always a
Hmm.
pretty successful deck. Matt Rogers taking it to high levels, other players, like you said, taking it to very high levels. But
Hmm.
you decided to
Yeah.
stick with it, and we know that you dallied,
You're
had
the
some
warrior boy.
dalliances with some other decks, but you came back,
Yeah.
and I wondered if you wanted to talk about. There was like a was it like a coin flip or something for one of the tournaments to choose?
Yes, one in the tournaments, I handed the TO both deck lists and I said pick one randomly, and he picked Dory. And
I bet you were
yeah,
well chuffed when he picked Dory.
I I don't know how I felt, to be honest. I kind of wanted to play Katsu, but someone said it very someone said it very clearly. He said, "Take Katsu if your goal is to get to the top 8. Take Dory if your goal is to win."
Yeah,
And that's
Oh,
partially about
yeah,
my
man.
reps with the hero, right?
yeah.
Because I like to believe I got decent at Katsu, but I'm nowhere near as good at Katsu as I am with Dory. And the reason I did play Dory in our biggest Road to Nats was because I imagined myself in a situation where I had to block efficiently, and I
Mm,
felt I could do so with Dory way better than I could do so with Katsu.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
fair.
and I think I agree with that. I think you on Dory, I mean, you need to be at your top of your game to win that matchup. Again, and it's not just you, Shin, it's anyone that's put in the hours to effectively not, you can never fully master a deck, but get to the point where you are so comfortable with what you're doing that it's almost like a second nature. And if you're
Hmm.
running that deck, you've got to be 100% in the game to beat that person. And I think
Yep.
if you put the reps in, you can get to that point. And I think I'm glad that you stuck with Dory. I mean, we used to play Blitz a lot with the Dory, and you played Dory and Blitz all the time, taken into CC with a lot of success there as well. And do you think you're gonna? I mean, I don't really want to actually ask you if this is the deck you're gonna take to Tales of Aria because it's far too soon to be
Well,
making
I'll
those
say
kind of
it.
judgment calls. So
So,
I'm just gonna ask you
so
instead.
I'll say it if you don't want to. So, Shingo, do you feel like you're going to be taking this deck to nationals with the Tales of Aria meta on its way, or do you think it's worth seeing if this strategy that Dorinthea is very good with is going to
Mhm.
hold up going forward?
The short answer is I don't know.
Oh, well,
um,
there you go. You
well,
heard it
the
here.
Video done.
the long answer. So part of the reason I wanted to do this video with you guys is I do agree with Dan. I think Dory was kind of thought of as a lower tier hero. She was still thought of as decent,
Hmm.
Oh,
but
she was
not
written off way
RT.
too quick.
Yeah, she was written off, and I thought I wrote her off personally as well. But then
Mm.
I knew how to play her best, so I took her and I got some success. And then people started asking me about my list and what I was doing differently, and I had to admit to them that I wasn't doing anything differently. She's still a good hero. So I did this video to kind of share the love with the other Dory people that want to try this deck list, that want to get better with it, and that want to have a better understanding with it. So that's part of it. Is I really like Dory. I like how she plays. I love the Dory mirror, right? Because it's a game of poker at that stage where you're just doing
Mm.
math, blocking exact numbers, and then praying that they don't have it. And there's turns where you're like, well, if they have it, I've lost anyway, so let's hold back.
There you
And it's a
go.
bit of a game of chicken. We used to compare it to a game of chicken. So I will shout out Adam, who is a UK player that's been on
Yeah,
Dory
man.
for his Road to Nats, performed really well. And our Dory mirrors are some of my favorite games because it's a pure game of take it when you should and then block when you can't take it.
Yeah.
And there is
It's
that
a
mindset
dance.
to it. It
It's a
is. It
lovely
is a dance.
dance.
Now, Tales of Aria brings Oldheim with his hero powered as a defense reaction, right?
Yeah,
You
no
can't you
reprise trigger.
you can't reprise that.
But it's only
And
two. Can you imagine
it
if
is
it was
only
three?
two.
Well, he
Yeah.
could. Well, he could. But isn't that more annoying? Not to go into this far too much, but wouldn't it be far more annoying for you? Because normally, most of the time, you've got a card in hand that you're going to
Mhm.
follow up with, and now you've got a hero that goes, "Yeah, put one of them onto the top," and it
Exactly.
Yeah.
just goes,
So
"Well, that's
And
my
now
plan out the
and now
window."
your
there
Dawnblade costs two to swing rather than one. That really messes with your
exactly.
ratios. Like,
It's
And then there's also the frostbite tokens and all of
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
And so the reality is I don't know if this deck will survive Tales of Aria. I'm sure there will be a version that will make sense, and it will come down to what our meta will be like, right?
Hmm.
Because I think Flesh and Blood is really balanced, and the way it keeps the balance is every deck has good matchups and bad matchups, right? And I get the feeling Oldheim is going to be a bad matchup for Dory, but will Oldheim be a good matchup into our meta? Who knows? So
We
maybe we'll
shall
have one
yeah,
or
see.
we
two
shall
Oldheim.
see.
And sorry, last part is why I said I got lucky. Prism is a perfect example. Prism is a
Hmm.
bad matchup for Dory. She's really difficult to deal with. She's a Hail Mary, she's a coin flip. Like, I don't want to play into a Prism. throughout the road to Nats, I can't remember how many games I've played. I only got to play 2 prisms,
Yeah.
and that's why I
That's
think of myself as lucky. Is if I had to deal with more prisms, there is no way in my head that I win 3 road to Nats.
But that's the
well.
thing.
I
That's
mean,
the
that's the
thing
way
with
it goes.
the thing with tournaments. You know,
Mhm.
if you want to go into a tournament with a deck that has no bad matchups, just play chain. But
Yeah.
Yeah,
you know, you can't
just
play it. We
play
can't have
chain.
everyone playing chain. So yeah, no,
Yeah,
that is a joke. But
I don't think it
chain
is.
your worst matchup is the dice, the dice roll.
Jane's
Your
worst
worst
matchup is his
matchup is
own deck.
yourself.
Is
Yeah,
Yeah,
yourself,
it's
yeah,
exactly.
literally his own
making
deck.
it's a misplay deck, as I
Yeah.
know very well. But I think and everyone is lucky. I mean, I got to some top fours, and I consider myself very lucky. But if you're
Some
lucky,
people are just unlucky.
if you're lucky enough times, you have to start asking yourself, maybe I'm actually pretty good. And I think when you get to 3 RTN wins, I think you
I
know,
think,
maybe it's not
yeah,
so much about luck anymore. But Shen, I wanted to say huge thanks. I think we'll wrap it up here.
big
Thank you so
time.
much for reaching out to us and sharing with us with this deck list. I'm sure in the future, when you're topping the Tales of Aria meta, you'll come back and share with us your new spice.
Yeah,
And
when you're
Yeah.
sitting on worlds, right, in
yeah,
your
when
top
you're at
8 worlds,
Worlds.
remember us, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just want to say to the Push the Point audience, I hope you've enjoyed this. It's something a little different, something that Hamish has been cooking up for a little bit. And I think
Yeah,
it's fair to say we're going to be doing a bit more of the actual YouTube content in the future and try and get some matches for you, try and get some more deck techs for you. Because we actually do know what we're talking about. Believe it or not,
yeah.
we're actually
We don't
pretty
just
good at the
crack
game.
open beer.
So
Yeah.
um,
Well, unless you
and
me come ninth and
we
10th.
have some good friends who are also very good at the game, so at the very least we can bring them on. So Shin, again, a huge thank you. You're on the UK Discord, you're on the international
Yep.
Discord. I'm sure you're happy for if people want to reach out to you and ask you questions about the
I'm
deck. I'm
more
sure
than
that's something.
happy. My Discord name is Shingo. I have a giraffe as my avatar.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, look
You
for the
can
giraffe, man.
look
You'll
for
be
the
fine.
giraffe.
yeah, look for
Yeah.
giraffe.
Well, thanks everyone. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
See
Bye
ya.
bye.